When we turned on the main amplifiers and turned the volume up at the very bottom, that enabled power and sound to go to the speakers in the front. This amplifier all the way at the top of the rack has to be turned on, and that rocker switch to turn it on is to the far left. That needs to go on in order for the speakers that go to the balconies and the sound going into the fellowship hall to happen. It all happens through this rain amplifier. Now we're going to look at the soundboard, our beautiful Yamaha IM824. This is the main volume. For the 9 AM service, we run it about there. And between the 20 and the 10, you'll notice numbers there. And for the 11 AM, we like to crank it. Go all the way up to 0. Alright, basically, you know, if you're running sound, you really do have the responsibility for making it sound nice, rich, and full, and nobody complaining. But if somebody does complain, you know, the easiest way to deal with that is to pull the overall sound of the soundboard down a little bit. It depends on how many people are in the room. Sometimes if the room is not very full, even at 11 AM service, you gotta kind of pull this back a little bit. Because the more people in the room, the more they absorb the sound, the more you gotta turn this up. Okay, so that's the overall main volume. Each channel here, a beautiful thing about what looks like a complicating soundboard is the fact that once you got one channel figured out, this is channel 1, it's the same exact configuration all the way across the board. So you don't have 300 buttons to learn. You just really have to figure out the essentials that you need for each channel. Starting off with this. These happen to be the drums. The drums happen to take up 2 channels. They're the only thing I know besides the choir that takes 2 channels. So you sort of kind of control 2 channels at a time if you're turning up the choir mics, which are the ones hanging from the ceiling over the choir, or if you're turning up the drummer, which is an electronic drum set, which is very, very wonderful. So you want to control those with 2, but for the rest, all of these other things, you're only going to have to push up and down 1 slider to control the volume for that channel. What is a channel? You got a person on a microphone with an orange piece of tape on it, they got a channel. You got someone at the pulpit, that's a channel. Okay? Those are the channels. So, and the bus, not to get too nerdy, but it's nice to know. This whole row of similar buttons, this is called a bus. So the buses go right and left. Let's just look at one channel. Let's just say we're going to be controlling the sound for the altar. That's a microphone that they may be using if they're not all using wireless mics. But let's just say that people are up there and they're using the altar mic. So we could look at this channel. The things that you need to know most importantly is in order for the channel to work, this on button has to be glowing. This is kind of like a backwards mute button. Most soundboards have a mute button. This one doesn't. It has an on button, which is kind of interesting. If you want sound to work on this channel, if you want that person holding a microphone to be heard, they have to have a glowing on button. If you turn the on off, you may want to do that because you may want to just focus all your sound on one person so that you have the best sound quality and all the other mics are off. You can turn mics off and on or mute them by simply pressing the on button again so there's no light. Make sure it's on if you want sound. Up above there's another thing that's kind of important. Effects. That's the yellow button in each case. Why are effects important? If somebody's singing, you want to turn up that effect so that they sound better. And if suddenly they start talking, you want to turn their effects down because it doesn't sound right for reverb or digital delay to be happening while somebody is speaking. So that's basically the effects. Let's take a quick moment. How do the effects work? In most cases the board is very simple to operate, but in this case on the effects it's kind of tricky. In order for the effects to work, there's an FX channel where the on button has to be on. If it's not on, the effects everywhere will not work, so that needs to be up. And there's one other thing that has to do with effects. It's not a yellow button, but if you look over here on the little section of the board called aux send, this has to be up also. So if you want the effects to work, turn the effects on the aux send. Make sure that the effects on button in this little stereo input section of the board is on, glowing. And then on the individual channel, turn up the yellow button to the desired effects level. This big slider down here is how you turn up and down the individual channels volume. So that'll be dynamic. In other words, two singers, one might be weak, one might be strong. They're not going to be at the same level. Or one might be a really wonderful singer and the other one not so wonderful. You might want to pull that other one down a little bit. Drums, you want to turn up the drums until they sound like a real drummer playing with a real band, and you can hear them. If you're running sound, it's really, really, really important to listen and look. You see a guitar player strumming a guitar. Well, over here it says guitar. That's where they are, unless they plugged in wrong. So you want to turn them up until you hear them. Is somebody playing the bass? Make sure their bass is up, especially before they go up there. Or as soon as they plug in, you want to turn their bass up because they're going to want to hear themselves to tune their bass, and they can't do that unless you've turned them up. They'll usually start yelling at you, "Hey, turn me up!" if you don't have them on and up. These volume sliders here are for the individual volume of each channel, and they correspond to this overall sound. So if this is all the way down, doesn't matter how far you push this up, there will be no sound. If this is up, but these are down, or their lights are not on, those individual channels won't work. So just make sure you got your overall volume up, and you got your sliders to where you want them when you're setting up the sound. Always good to do a sound check in the beginning, kind of get things looking nice and where they need to be. Be aware of when the choir is singing that they should be up, and when they're not singing, it's good to pull them back down. Why? Because they chatter, they talk to each other, they make comments that you don't want to hear. So it's good to turn those down. If you got a live broadcast going on, the people listening to the live broadcast are hearing a lot more than we think. Sometimes more than we're hearing, because we left the choir mics up. When the person is preaching, we want really nothing more than their microphone to be active. That is usually done with one little button. Like I said, this board, you don't have to know a lot of this board, but there is one little tricky button that's called a mute master. I believe it's number 4. It is. Number 4. That's how we mute all of the microphones except for the wireless microphones. The preaching is always done on the wireless microphone and the instruments. Because the instruments, they're probably not going to be playing while the person is speaking through his wireless mic. So if you want to use that, you can. You can push number 4. And if you look at the board, when I push number 4 and I stop pushing and I push it again, a certain amount of these channels go on and off. That's because we've set this in such a way that the channels that we don't want on while a person is using a wireless mic, such as the preacher, we don't want any of these things to be active. If you'll notice, the choir mics went off. That's a fast, clean way to mute all those. Just got to remember that they are muted, so you don't get all frustrated because they're not working, and push them again. That's the number 4 on the mute master. Personally, I'd rather kind of like just push buttons on and off, or mute them, or just pull them all the way down and pull them back up. That's a style preference. It's how you want to run sound. If somebody is using the piano headset, like Jane said, Peter Kirkpatrick, if you see somebody singing some really huge monitor system on their ears, that's controlled by this button right here. Ooh, I just made it feedback. Okay, that's where you want to get that level. It's really important to know that even if nobody is using it, because if that thing is turned up, it sounds annoying. It sounds like there's a distorted guitar or something. And see, what is that distortion? You want to keep that down unless somebody's actually using it. That headset also happens to correspond to this one. This is the partner to it, and it's a way of communicating back and forth with the person at the piano or whoever happens to be wearing the stage. If you see this light glowing, it's really hard to pay attention, but if somebody alerts you that the light's glowing, or you see somebody like waving on stage, look down. They're trying to talk to you on this thing. Stage monitors. I put little red tape around this button. It's red because it has to do with live sound in the room. There are 2 speakers that are powered up on the stage. Those are really helpful for people singing so they can hear themselves. The bass player, the drummer, they're all listening to the sound that's on stage. That is happening not from amplifiers in the media rack. No, those are for the main speakers and for the speakers up in the balcony and the fellowship hall. The two little speakers sitting on the floor of the stage are self-powered speakers, but they depend on you, the soundboard operator, to turn them up. So around there, kind of halfway, you know, that's fine. Wherever that sounds good, you could, during your sound check, you could turn the mains all the way off, and you could just say, let's listen to the sound guys on stage. And turn this one little blue button here with some red tape on it that says stage monitors, turn that up. Now this is, at this point I want you to know something. These are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Some of these numbers have been covered because I put labels over them. That's okay, because if it says piano headset over here, you see numbers here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all these little numbers on each channel correspond to this section right here. So, number 1, the bus piano headset. This is controlling how much volume is going into the piano headset. That's not really that exciting or important, but it gets important when you're controlling the live sound in the room that's coming up on the monitors, the stage monitors on stage. So just like this is the master volume for the main speakers, that all of these sliders for the individual channels are working with, this is the master volume for the two self-powered monitor speakers on the stage. And if you see right here, this is number 3 bus, and they are also red. Just like the yellow controls the effects, the red controls the live sound on the stage monitors. So if somebody's singing and they say they can't hear themselves, it's not appropriate to turn them up here more. I mean, you can look and make sure that they're up in the room, but they're probably concerned about the sound that they're getting on the stage, which is the stage monitor. So if it happens to be the person with the orange mic, by the way, there's basically 3 mics on stage, individual mics that people put on, and they are the piano vocal, which is number 8, and the one I have orange tape there and white tape. If you have good eyes or the camera is focusing in on it, you could actually see orange tape on their cable. And I put orange there to indicate that. That's usually, if we have things set up correctly, there's a microphone on the left and a microphone on the right in terms of these 2 microphones. You know, the piano microphone is usually always by the piano. So there's orange and white, left and right. You got the main volumes, and then you go up here on the channel, follow it up like this. That's how I do it. I actually use my finger. I kind of like to rub gently over there to make sure I'm on the same channel. That's the, let's say, the white microphone. I go up, there it is. That's the volume that they need. Crank it up until they're screaming with feedback. I can turn it down so they can't hear themselves and they're complaining, or I can turn it up so they're happy. That's how I make them happy. And I make them sound good.
Want someone happy and you